Hello student, I am Professor Smita Jha from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and as you know that we are doing research methodology. There are various important points to discuss research methodology to know about research activity, but in my opinion one of the most important aspects is how to form research questions, because research is an argument and the entire discussion is based on the justifiable, meaningful and significant questions. So let us see that how to form research question. It is likely that at some point you will be required to create your own research question. The research question states the specific issue or problem that your assignment will focus on. It also outlines the task that you will need to complete. So there is no universal set of criteria for a good research question. Means you have to evolve on your own. Different disciplines have different priorities and requirements. A good research question for a history paper will differ from a good research question for a biology paper as well as for humanities, English, literature, so on. In general, however, a good research question should be clear and focused. The question should be clearly state what the writer needs to do, no ambiguity at all. Not too broad and not too narrow. The question should have an appropriate scope. If the question is too broad, it will not be possible to answer it thoroughly within the word limit. If it is too narrow, you will not have enough to write about and you will struggle to develop a strong argument. Not too easy to answer. The question should require more than a simple yes or no answer. Not too difficult to answer. You must be able to answer the question thoroughly within the given time frame and word limit. It should be researchable. You must have access to a suitable amount of quality research materials such as academic books and refereed journal articles. Analytical rather than descriptive. In other words, your research question should allow you to produce an analysis of an issue or problem rather than a simple description of it. So again, the moot point is how to write a research question. Well, you can follow some steps to develop a strong research questions. The first is choose your topic, that is selection of the topic. Second, do some preliminary reading about the current state of the field. That is to say that you should have some idea in your mind, the base knowledge. Third, narrow your focus to a specific niche, that is a specific idea, subject that should be focused. Identify the research problem that you will address. The way you frame your question depends on what your research aims to achieve. That is why an idea to develop before is very important. A research question pinpoints exactly what you want to find out in your work. A good research question is essential to guide your research paper, dissertation, or thesis. All research questions should be focused on a single problem or issue. That you can say like thesis statement. Researchable using primary or secondary sources. Feasible to answer within the time frame and practical constraint. This is very important. Time management while writing your PhD. Specific enough to answer thoroughly. Complex enough to develop the answer over the space of a paper or thesis. Relevant to your field of study or society more broadly, and using your research problem to develop your research question. Now, what makes a strong research question? That is again a very, very important question. Research question anchor your whole project. So it is important to spend some time refining them. The criteria that can be very helpful while evaluating the strength of your research questions are focused and researchable, that I mentioned earlier also. Your central research question should work together with your research problem to keep your work focused. If you have multiple questions, They should all clearly tie back to your central aim. It should be answerable using credible sources. Your question must be answerable using quantitative or qualitative data or by reading scholarly sources on the topic to develop your argument. If such data is impossible to access, you likely need to rethink your question. It should be not based on value judgments. Avoid subjective words like good, bad, better, and worse. These do not give clear criteria for answering the question. Is X or Y a better policy? How effective are X and Y policies at reducing rate of Z? Now determine the requirements of the question. Before you can construct a good research question, you will need to determine the requirements of your assignment, means your task of research. What is the purpose of this assignment, means this research? Is it to test a proposition? Is it to evaluate a set of data? Is it to state and defend an argument? Check the assignment or project instructions and discuss the purpose with your tutor or lecturer. Determining the purpose will help you to choose the most appropriate topic and word your question in the most useful way. Next is choosing the topic, that is the area of your research. Have you been given a list of topics to choose from, or can you choose your own? Check the assignment, instruction, and if you are still in doubt, discuss the requirements with your instructor, supervisor, and teacher. The best approach is to choose a topic that you are interested in. If you are interested in your topic, you are more likely to invent more time, effort, and creativity into your research and writing. The greater your interest, the more likely it is that you will produce an assignment that is interesting to read. The first step is formulating a research question is to identify your topic and purpose. Your topic is the general area of interest that you want to investigate, such as education, health, culture. Your purpose is the reason why you want to conduct qualitative research on this topic, such as to explore, describe, understand, or explain a phenomenon. You should be able to state your topic and purpose in a few words or sentences that convey your main focus and intention. Third, conduct preliminary research, means before deciding, you just collect some more idea regarding your proposed research. Before you write your question, it is advisable to read a small number of relevant academic sources. Limit your reading to recently published material and perhaps one or two influential works on the topic. The goal here is to familiarize yourself with the key debates in academic writing on the topic. Reading in order to develop a research question is different from reading in order to answer it. Focus on the main ideas and arguments. These are usually found in the introduction and the conclusion. The next step is formulating a research question is to review the literature on your topic and purpose. The literature review is a systematic and critical analysis of existing sources that are relevant to your research. It helps you to identify the key concepts, theories, debates, and gaps in the existing knowledge. You should look for sources that are credible, current, and comprehensive, such as peer-reviewed journals, books, and reports. You should also use appropriate research strategies, such as keywords, databases, and references to find and select relevant sources. The third step in formulating a research question is to find a gap in the literature on your topic and purpose. A gap is a missing or insufficient piece of information or knowledge that needs to be addressed by further research. A gap can be identified by looking for inconsistencies, contradictions, limitations, or unanswered questions in the literature. You should be able to justify why the gap is important, significant, and relevant for your research and for the field of study. And then, very important step, narrow down your topic. Having conducted some preliminary research, you should now be in a position to narrow down your topic. In most cases, you will need to narrow down your focus on a specific issue or debate within the broader topic. This is because it is much more effective to cover a single issue or dimension of a topic in depth than to skim the surface of several. A gap can be too broad, vague, or complex to be addressed by a single research question. You should refine your gap by considering the following factors: your research context, such as the setting, population, time frame of your study, your research approach, such as the paradigm, design, methods of your qualitative research, and your research resources, such as time, budget, skills available for your study. Well, there are several ways that you might go about narrowing down your topic. Think about these subtopics, specific issues, and key debates that exist within the broader topic. Think about the value of focusing on a particular period of time, a particular geographical location, a particular organization, or a particular group of people. Think about what you want to say in your assignment. What are the key points and arguments that you want to get across? Which subpoint, time frame, or other limitation would allow you to make these points in the most effective way? Write your question. Now that you have narrowed down your topic, you can turn your attention to the wording of your research question. As mentioned earlier, the research question must outline a clear task that you will need to complete. And also remember that you will need to keep the purpose of your assignment, project, thesis in mind when thinking about the wording of your question, and that the purpose will differ from discipline to discipline. The fifth step in formulating a research question is to write your research question based on your narrowed gap. Your research question is a clear and concise statement that guides your research and reflects your purpose. It should be specific, focused, answerable by qualitative research. It should also be open-ended, meaning that it does not have a predetermined or yes-no answer. You can use words such as how, what, why, or in what ways to start your research question. For example, if your topic is social media and your purpose is to explore how young adults use it for identify information, your research question could be, how do young adults construct and express their identities through social media platforms? In general, however, a good research question requires you to analyze an issue or problem. How and why questions are therefore more useful than what or describe questions. Other useful words that you might use are critique, argue, example, and examine and evaluate. Selection of problem is not the first step in research, but identification of the problem is. Selection of problem is governed by reflective thinking. It is wrong to think that identification of a problem means to select a topic of a research or a statement of the problem. A topic or a statement of the problem and research problem are not the synonyms, but they are inclusive. The problem concerned with the functioning of the broader area of the field studied, whereas topic or title or a statement of the problem is the verbal statement of the problem. The topic is the definition of the problem, which delimits or pinpoints the task of a researcher. A good or well-constructed research question is original and of interest to the researcher and the outside world. It is clear and focused. It provides enough specifics that it is easy to understand its purpose, and it is narrow enough that it can be answered. If the question is too broad, it may not be possible to answer it thoroughly. If it is too narrow, you may not find enough resources or information to develop a strong argument or research hypothesis. The question concept is researchable in terms of time and access to a suitable amount of quality research resources. It is analytical rather than descriptive. The research question should allow you to produce an analysis of an issue or problem rather than a simple description of it. In other words, it is not answerable with a simple yes or no, but requires a synthesis and analysis of ideas and sources. The results are potentially important and may change current ideas or practices, and there is the potential to develop further projects with similar theme. The well-constructed question provides guidance for determining search terms and search strategy parameters. The process of developing a good question to research involves taking your topic and breaking each aspect of it down into its component parts. Research questions can be categorized into different types, depending on the type of research to be undertaken. Qualitative questions concern broad areas or more specific areas of research and focus on discovering, explaining, and exploring. Types of qualitative questions include exploratory questions, seeks to understand without influencing the result. The objective is to learn more about a topic without bias or preconceived notion. Predictive questions seek to understand the intent or future outcome around a topic. Interpretive questions tries to understand people's behavior in a natural setting. The objective is to understand how a group makes sense of shared experiences with regards to various phenomena. Quantitative questions prove or disprove a researcher's hypothesis and are constructed to express the relationship between variables and whether this relationship is significant. Now, what are the types of quantitative question? And these are descriptive questions. Now, descriptive questions are the most basic type of quantitative research question and seeks to explain the when, where, why, or how something occurred. Then comparative questions, which are helpful when studying groups with dependent variables, where one variable is compared with another. Descriptive research questions aim to measure the responses of a study's population to one or more variables or describe variables that the research will measure. These questions typically begin with what. Students aim for a what is research question to uncover particular processes. Comparative research questions aim to discover the differences between two or more groups for an outcome variable. This question can be casual as well. For instance, the researcher may compare a group where a certain variable is involved and another group where that variable is not present. Relationship-based questions try to answer whether or not one variable has an influence on another. These types of questions are generally used in experimental research questions. It seeks to explore and define trends and interactions between two or more variables. These research question design often includes both dependent and independent variables and use words such as association or trend. Well, quantitative research questions are precise that we should understand. These questions typically include the population to be studied, dependent and independent variables, and the research design to be used. They are usually framed and finalized at the start of the study. Quantitative research question also established a link between the research question and the research design. Moreover, these questions are not answerable with yes or no responses. As a result, quantitative research questions don't use words such as is, are, do, or does. Quantitative research questions usually seek to understand particular social, familiar, or educational experiences or processes that occur in a particular context or location. They can be further categorized into three types: descriptive, comparative, and relationship. Qualitative research questions may concern broad areas of research or more specific areas of study. Similar to quantitative research questions, qualitative research questions are linked to research design. Unlike their quantitative counterparts, though, qualitative research questions are usually adaptable, non-directional, and more flexible. As a result, studies using these questions generally aims to discover, explain, or explore. Contextual research questions seek to describe the nature of what already exists. Descriptive research question attempts to describe a phenomenon. Emancipatory research question aim to produce knowledge that allows for engagement in social action, especially for the benefit of disadvantaged people. Evaluating research question assess the effectiveness of existing methods or paradigms. Explanatory research question seek to expound on a phenomenon or examine reasons for an association between what exists. They investigate little known areas of a particular topic. Generative research questions aim to provide new ideas for the development of theories and actions. Ideological research questions are used in research that aims to advance specific ideologies of a position. Now, your research question becomes the primary objective of your study. The best designed studies keep the objectives simple and specific and state them from the start. As Fitzpatrick states, it is important to ascertain exactly what the primary objective is, as this is the question that the study must be designed to answer and which dictates the primary endpoint measurement upon which the statistical sample size is calculated. Keeping the primary objective clear and simple result in a clear answer that is easier to achieve. It is best to aim for one single clear primary objective and to have a few related appropriate secondary questions or objectives that do not distract from the primary objective. Once you have picked a topic, you can start doing preliminary research. This initial stage of research accomplishes two goals. First, a preliminary review of related literature allows you to discover issues that are currently being discussed by scholars and fellow researchers. This way, you get up-to-date relevant knowledge on your topic. Second, a preliminary review of related literature allows you to spot existing gaps or limitations in existing knowledge of your topic. With a certain amount of fine-tuning, you can later use these gaps as the focus of your research question. Moreover, according to Farrugia et al. 2010, certain institutions that provide grants encourage application to conduct a systematic review of available studies and evidence to see if a similar recent study doesn't already exist before applying for a grant. Throughout all of the key activities that you will need to undertake as a researcher, for example, developing the protocol, writing the standard operating procedures which ensure uniformity of processes and procedures, running the study, analyzing the data, you must consistently address the issue of whether or not research question is being answered. Continuous monitoring to ensure the research question is being answered is the responsibility of not just the investigator but all collaborators and partners also. The process of collaborating on and developing a research question forms the basis of the study protocol. The protocol is the document that turns a research question into a feasible study that allows you to answer that question. Once you are confident that you have formulated a good question that could be answered through a well-designed study, which once answered could improve health outcomes in a population, you can add to and finalize your protocol. Key point to remember: a research question is a question that a clinical study is designed to answer. Getting the question right is important as it determines the organization of the study's boundaries, and the focus of the study. The question also provides the framework for the write-up and determines the methods and data that will be needed. Clinical equipoise is the state of being truly uncertain about whether a new drug, treatment, or intervention offers improved benefit or not. The key activity is developing your research question is collaboration and consultation. This process takes your question from being an interesting idea into an optimal, relevant, and feasible study. It is important to collaborate with groups such as community leaders, clinicians, potential participants, and specialists, as in the past, seemingly variable studies have failed to recruit as they have been viewed as unacceptable by a key group, that is, their study was not culturally acceptable, clinically feasible, as like there are a number of frameworks that one use for properly constructing a research question, and the two most commonly used framework are PICOT framework. The PICOT research question framework was first introduced in 1995 by Richardson et al. Using the PICOT framework, that is PICOT, research question can be constructed to address important elements of the study, including the population to be studied, the expected outcomes, and the time it takes to achieve the outcome. With these elements, the framework is more commonly used in clinical research and evidence-based studies. So, population, patient or problem, intervention or indicator being studied, comparison group, outcome of interest, time frame of the study. Is the topic researchable? That is again very important point or finalizing question. Pretend you are writing a research paper right now at the beginning of the 21st century. Let us look at some of the questions and decide whether they can or cannot be easily researched. Question A: do the economies that result from a trash burning plant outweigh or not outweigh its environmental impact? Question A is researchable. You have to shift through a lot of information, both pros and cons, valid and invalid, in order to choose the best information to answer the research question and support your point of view. But the point is that there is at least enough information to shift through. Question B: does McDonald's or Burger King make a better burger? Question B is not researchable as it is worded, since it has no concrete meaning. What does better mean? Better in terms of nutrition, better tasting, better value, fewer calories, better for making your kids happy. Now, this question could become researchable only if you define its term. Evaluation of the problem. When considering a problem, a researcher is required to ask himself a series of questions about it. These are helpful in the evaluation of the problem on the basis of personal suitability of the researcher and social value of the problem. Following question must be answered affirmatively before the study is undertaken. First, is the problem researchable? Second, is the problem new? Third, is the problem significant? Fourth, is the problem feasible for the particular researcher? In order to be feasible, a problem should agree with these questions. Research competencies of the researcher, interest and enthusiasm of the researcher, financial consideration in the project, time requirement for the project, administrative consideration in the project, best practices to create a good research question. A good research question ought to be clear. It should provide enough specifics that one's audience can easily understand it without needing additional explanation. Example under research question: how does the environment affect people? Now, this research question is unclear because it lacks specificity. The term environment is too broad and could refer to various environments we live in, such as physical, social, cultural, or natural. There is also ambiguity in the word affect. It is fairly vague. Lastly, to discuss how environment affects all people is much too broad. It is not a researchable topic within the scope of one paper. Without specifying these terms, the question lacks the necessary precision for focused research. To fix this, the author should attempt to narrow their topic. For example, concise research question: how does parental involvement impact the academic performance of high school students in urban public schools? It is important to be both specific and concise to create a focused question that can be answered in a research project. Finally, a research question should be open-ended and worthy of extended research discussion. Example of non-open-ended research question: is Khan Academy beneficial in improving student test scores in mathematics? The research question is framed with a binary nature, suggesting yes or no answer. Therefore, there is no room for the author to explore this topic. To fix this, the author may consider including the question words how or why in their research question. Or they could expand their question to brand out into various factors to discuss or find measurable avenues such as time. Example of open-ended questions: how does a student use Khan Academy in mathematics improve students' understanding of mathematical concepts over time? Using the word how at the beginning of the question invite discussing and critical thinking. Questions that begin with how cannot be answered by a simple yes or no because it requires the author to explore the concept. Overall, creating an open-ended question invites exploration and does not limit the research to a binary outcome. Now, common pitfall in formulating research question. When developing a research question, it is crucial to be aware of common pitfall that can hinder the clarity and effectiveness of your inquiry as a researcher. Recognizing these pitfalls can help ensure that your research question is robust and well positioned to guide your study effectively. Overly broad questions cover one of the most frequent mistakes is crafting a research question that is too broad or vague. Such questions can lead to unfocused research and make it difficult to draw meaningful conclusion. Aim for a specificity by clearly defining the scope and parameters of your study. It is essential to ensure that your research question is feasible, given your resources, time constraint, and access to data. Questions that are overly ambitious or complex may not be practical to investigate thoroughly. Using vague, ambiguous terms, languages led to misunderstanding about the intent and focus of your research. Strive for precision in your wording to enhance clarity and facilitate effective communication with your audience. Now, failing to review existing literature before formulating your research question can result in redundancy or the pursuit of questions that have already been adequately addressed. Conducting a thorough literature review is vital to identify gaps in knowledge and inform your research focus. Research questions should always consider ethical implications, especially when involving human subject or sensitive topic. Questions that could lead to unethical research practices or harm to participants should be carefully reconsidered. How can you validate your research question effectively? To ensure your research question is both methodologically sound and practically applicable, begin by engaging in structured peer review sessions with subject matter experts. Solicit targeted feedback to identify potential gaps in clarity and feasibility, and consider conducting limited pilot studies that provide preliminary data on possible challenges in data collection and analysis. Assess the question against established benchmark criteria and review framework to confirm its novelty and ethical viability. In addition, seek interdisciplinary consultation to redefine complexity and scope, thereby cementing its relevance in involving academic context. This rigorous validation process not only elevates the study's quality, but also aligns research goals with career prospects as seen in academic programs offering insights into highest paying bachelor degree. PEO framework. Like the PICOT framework, the PEO framework is commonly used in clinical studies as well. However, this framework is more useful to qualitative research question. This framework includes these elements: P for population being studied, that is the material, data; E, exposure to pre-existing conditions; and O, outcome of the interest. With this, I conclude the present discussion. Thank you very much. Let us meet in the next lecture with a new topic.